Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. At the Republican convention in Milwaukee.
Oh, wait. You guys, we're going to chill with the Ohio love. We got to win Michigan, too, here, so.
JD Vance gives his party and everyone else their first look at his politics as Trump's pick for vice president.
If you look at sort of this general approach of, well, Republicans will come in and they'll be deregulatory, in cases like antitrust, I think that's just completely not true, given where the Republican Party is now.
What Senator Vance's politics and economic populism mean for the future of the Republican Party. Former SEC Chair Jay Clayton.
My hope is that populism and U.S. competitiveness come together.
They're oxymorons, aren't they?
No, they're not always oxymorons.
Plus, President Joe Biden is sick with COVID and apparently of Elon Musk. Then, AI doctors not so far off. A new study found ChatGPT scored a 98% on a medical exam most first-year residents get a 70 on. Former FDA Commissioner Gottlieb says there may be a time and a place for AI-assisted medicine.
I've put in lab results, extensive lab results that were quite perplexing, and the models were able to give a pretty good differential diagnosis.
It's Thursday, July 18th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Yeah, here we go. It's a Thursday, and there was a lot of activity yesterday.
President Biden testing positive for COVID yesterday. The White House saying he's experiencing mild symptoms and will isolate in Delaware. Continue to carry out all of his duties fully during that time. A spokesperson noting that Biden is vaccinated and boosted, and his physician said he's received his first dose of Paxlovid. The White House planning to provide regular updates on the president's status. Meantime, Biden's X account later posted a thread beginning with a post that said, "I'm sick," followed by a post that read, "of Elon Musk and his rich buddies trying to buy this election." It included a link to his campaign fundraising page. It comes as pressure seems to be mounting right now on the president to bow out of the presidential race. A new report saying that Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi has told Biden that polling shows he cannot defeat Trump and could destroy Democrats' chance of winning back control of the House. And we also heard yesterday news that Senator Chuck Schumer and House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries have reportedly told Biden that it would be better for the country and the party if he ended his campaign. In California, Congressman Adam Schiff publicly calling for Biden to withdraw yesterday as well. So lots of pressure mounting beyond the COVID piece of it. The question, of course, now is what the president is going to do or not do. What do you think?
He needs to, if he needs,
and then the question is,
he would have to listen to these people, and they would have to
Right.
finally convince him, and they'd have to find a graceful way out.
And it's not just a graceful way. I think the next question is, given what seems to be, we talked about it, given what seems to be, and we're having the Republican National Convention now, so there's just a lot of attention to it. But after the president was shot, talking about the former president, Trump, the swell of goodwill that he has garnered from this whole situation, if you are Governor Whitmer or name your Democrat.
You want to do it.
And you think that you have a chance in 2028. Are you saying I'm stepping into this right now?
I don't think it's ever could be anyone but the vice president. She's been vice president. She's vice president. She's vice president. She's the heir apparent to this.
No,
that's why she was vice president.
I know that, but I also know that
you just really wish it would be someone else, and you should.
No.
You've
polls,
interviewed her, right?
I've interviewed her. I like her. That's
what I
do
mean.
with that.
So
the point is,
give her a shot.
The question is whether, from the polling perspective, she
can't
could win.
base things like
that is the
that.
question.
The problem becomes that no one else has received the votes from the Democratic voters. So it looks at the last moment, like some takeover.
The Democrats,
without any
that
representation.
party can't do that. Yeah, that party can't.
I know you want her to.
No, that's not what it is. I'm telling you, I just know well enough that you thought I wanted President Biden. When I just thought it was sort of just watching everyone know all along where he was, and they didn't care, and then suddenly it becomes clear to everyone else, and then they pull the rug. Like George Clooney is the poster child for everything that was wrong with the Biden. But you cannot. The Democratic Party prides itself on inclusiveness and everything else, and there's just you cannot do that.
Here's the fundamental question: To me, President Biden has said repeatedly the only reason he's running, the only
because
reason he's running,
the only one who's going to be
he
Trump.
believes he's the only right. So to me, the only rational argument for him to step away would be to say that he believes that there's another person that he believes can beat Trump, not just that has a chance.
None of the polls show any of those people saying at this point.
And that's why it's so hard for him too.
You think I have these hidden? You don't think Kamala Harris can win. And the only reason you're saying all this is you want to win so badly.
I'm not trying to win anything. I'm apolitical.
Okay,
I know you don't believe that.
Looking at
this is not
but you're channeling. You're looking at what Democrats are thinking and realizing they don't think she can win, and they
correct.
want
that is the prevailing view.
Right.
Yes.
And therefore you want some. You've even
not what I want. It's what. If you're
Democrat.
Yes.
Well, how come you came? Democrats tell you that maybe Mark Kelly would be good, or Democrats have told you that?
Yeah, actually, there have been big donors who have
actually, yes. That's
okay.
Yes.
Then they're telling you, and you're reporting.
But the problem is if it looks like big donors are choosing rather than the voters who have already voted in the primaries to this point, that gets you in trouble.
None of it's a good look. It's for once the Democrats
problem.
Well, none of it looks
many
good.
levels.
For once, the Democrats are totally in chaos, and the Republicans seem to be united. I thought it was weird. I mean, I don't know if any of the main people do their own Twitter accounts, but just watching the I'm sick of it, that was so obvious that someone in his staff came up with that and wrote it. It's just kind of, he's got other problems.
So are all the fundraising emails that you get from all of these people.
They are.
So let's
but this is Twitter.
It's hilarious. I don't know who signed me up for all of them. I get just about
everyone. But when I saw
I'm
sick, I thought it was weird that he would be saying I'm sick. And then it later followed up by of all the,
Let's talk about the GOP and the Republican National Convention. Senator JD Vance taking the stage last night at that convention. Eamon Javers joins us now with more. He made a lot of comments and a lot of news. Eamon.
He really did, Andrew. This was J.D. Vance's chance to introduce himself to the nation. The Ohio senator, just 39 years old, now the heir apparent to the MAGA movement, either in 2024 if Donald Trump loses in the fall or in 2028 after the end of Donald Trump's second term. J.D. Vance will be positioned to inherit this powerful political movement in America. He used the opportunity last night to tell the story of his own personal history and to make a generational contrast between himself and certainly Joe Biden on the Democratic side. He also used the opportunity to indicate a shift toward populist economics on the conservative side and make a break, at least rhetorically, with corporate America. Here's what he said about American big business.
We need a leader who's not in the pocket of big business, but answers to the working man, union and non-union alike. A leader who won't sell out to multinational corporations, but will stand up for American companies and American industry.
Now, that idea of reaching out to union workers and a worker-first economic policy is really part of this populist economic evolution that we've seen on the Republican side, shifting away from a focus or an allegiance to corporate elites and toward workers and trying to reach out to those union voters that Republicans think are gettable for them this cycle around. You saw the Teamsters president here in Milwaukee making a speech to this Republican National Convention. That is all a piece of an effort here to be more pro-union worker. We also saw J.D. Vance last night signaling a break with Wall Street as well. Here's what he said.
We're done, ladies and gentlemen, catering to Wall Street. We'll commit to the working man. We're done importing foreign labor. We're going to fight for American citizens and their good jobs and their good wages.
So I think the thing to look at here is a distinction that J.D. Vance at least is making between multinational corporations and American companies and American manufacturing. I think J.D. Vance looks at the world and sees these large global institutions as in some way less American than domestic manufacturing certainly would be. So I think as you look at this Republican Party, you've got to see now a populist change here in rhetoric and a change in direction here in terms of the way they approach both corporate elites and Wall Street guys. Back over to you.
Eamon, the question I'd ask is, that is obviously J.D. Vance's perspective. It's been his personal plank. The question is whether it is former President Trump's plank. and how
Well,
much
look,
in agreement they are or not on that?
Well, we don't know, right? And obviously, you've got to win the election, then get into office, then implement your policies. We're a long way from all of that, but just rhetorically, this does signal a shift. And look, JD Vance was allowed to say those things last night. Donald Trump's team, Donald Trump himself, has a red pen, right? And they can take anything they want out of JD Vance's speech and add anything in that they want to add. The fact that JD Vance was saying those things on the stage of the Republican National Convention last night, I think indicates that Republicans see this as a winning message, both with their base in the hall, but also nationally. They are aware that they're reaching out to the MAGA faithful who are here in Milwaukee, but they're also reaching out to Republican voters and voters generally nationwide with an address like that in prime time. So they could have taken that out if they wanted to, and they didn't.
There's different ways to try to carrot and stick domestic production and manufacturing and jobs and everything else, Eamon, and that's where I think there's ways of doing it. We had the CFO of Johnson & Johnson on yesterday. I don't know if you saw the interview. He gave a concrete example.
Yeah, it was a good interview.
A concrete example of why that tax rate, which went to 21%, allowed J&J to scuttle shelf plans to build a manufacturing operation abroad, and it made it economically feasible to do it in the United States.
From a business perspective, you certainly want to have an administration that is at least neutral and not hostile to business. If it's friendly, that's even better. I think in terms of tax policy, that's critically important. I can point to an investment we're about to announce shortly, over $1 billion with the latest cell therapy manufacturing. It's going to be likely placed in the United States. In 2016, that was not the case. That would have been a manufacturing facility probably built overseas. Since 2017, we invested more than $30 billion in the subsequent 4 years after the passage of the Tax Act than the prior 4 years. It led to about 6,000 more jobs here in the U.S. for Johnson & Johnson. So there is a direct correlation. It makes it very easy as the CFO to look at an analysis and not knock out the U.S. because the rate was what it used to be at 35%.
So I don't know when Vance talks about wanting to create good American jobs and not outsource jobs, I don't know whether that is the same as saying I'm okay with going to 28% on the, and that's what some of the people that
I don't think you can draw a straight line there either. Yeah.
No, I think Trump, if JD Vance wants to go to 20 or 25 or 30 or 35% on the corporate rate, Trump's going to tell them that is not happening because Trump said 15 yesterday. But on the other hand, they might try to do it with tariffs. And I don't know whether, the Journal has a good piece. What would another Trump economy look like? And if it's loaded with tariffs and other protectionist strategies, that probably would be something JD Vance would like. Then that may not be. It may not be good.
How inflationary is that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Becky. And look, one example people were talking about here in Milwaukee yesterday, there was a Wall Street analyst note that went out in late June about the healthcare sector, talking about the impact of a Trump administration on the healthcare sector at that time. And in that note, it said, we'll probably get a less regulatory FTC. We'll probably get more mergers and acquisitions in the healthcare space. So that's good for big health giants. A lot of folks here think that's exactly directionally wrong, that a Trump FTC would actually be more aggressive than a Biden FTC on big mergers, particularly in certain sectors that are not liked by the MAGA base. I think that if you look at sort of this general approach of, well, Republicans will come in and they'll be deregulatory, in cases like antitrust, I think that's just completely not true, given where the Republican Party is now and where it wants to go in the future.
Is there the idea that Lena Khan would stay on? JD Vance has said he really likes her.
I can't get a comment out of the FTC on whether she would stay on or not stay on. JD Vance has said he likes her. I would imagine they'd want their own person, but I imagine that person would be sort of ideologically very close to Lena Khan, if not more aggressive on big mergers, particularly in big tech.
Right.
And media.
Eamon Javers, it's fascinating. Thank you for your reporting on all of it.
Cheese will be next.
Still to come, the tale of two Republican parties. Former President Trump's selection of JD Vance as running mate marks a significant change in economic priorities for the GOP. Jay Clayton, who served as chair of the SEC under former President Trump, weighs in on the key taxing questions in the new Trumponomics.
How much more revenue can we generate under any tax scheme? You know what? I think you ask liberal economists, conservative economists, there's a cap on that. That cap is lower than our spending.
Squawk Pod will be right back. This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. Senator JD Vance speaking at the Republican National Convention last night, accepting the nomination to be former President Trump's running mate.
Together, we will make sure our allies share in the burden of securing world peace. No more free rides for nations that betray the generosity of the American taxpayer.
Joining us right now to talk about all this, Jay Clayton, former SEC chair and a CNBC contributor. And the big question I would ask you, more than anything else that I think the business community is trying to understand, is how much you think JD Vance's views on business and regulation and sort of a shift to a more populist, to even a more populist approach, if you can believe it, than former President Trump, is the same policies that former President Trump would pursue if he were president.
So I watched the speech last night. I've been listening to Senator Vance. He is doing something that I think is important from an economic perspective, which is he is appealing to the everyday American, and he's saying, you know, you're making 100 in income. Your expenses are 95. You're just trying to save 5 for college, a house, retirement. You know, what is happening to you? And, you know, that cohort has not been treated well by economic policy over the last 15 years. They were the most adversely affected by the housing crisis. They are the most adversely affected by high inflation. And what do those events have in common?
Right.
Those events have in common when Wall Street and the government get together. And when Wall Street and the government get together around the globe, what happens? Asset prices go way up. And the folks who are looking to get on the asset ladder, they suffer.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I think the thing that we're all trying to figure out, though, is JD Vance. I mean, you can go watch hearings where he has, raked over the coals Wall Street banks, right? He has talked about how he likes Lena Khan.
He's aligned with Elizabeth Warren to do clawbacks.
There's a real question, I think, within the business community, for better or worse, and where the Republican Party really sits on these issues. And maybe the better question is where you think former President Trump sits on these issues if he becomes the president.
Well, I think former President Trump, who is going to set economic policy, and I'm sure that JD Vance will be a voice at the table. There'll be other voices that we all know. You have people like Lighthizer. You have people like Kevin Hassett. You have
they're opposites. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lighthizer is with this American Compass group. They want to raise corporate taxes. They want to embolden Lena Khan even further. They have a lot of. You think of classic conservatism, whatever you want to call it, Reaganomics, whatever you want to call it, Larry Kudlow. You can pick just about any issue and they're on the other side of that. They say they have JD Vance's ear. We're wondering, rightly so, does JD Vance have enough sway with Trump to get him to say, you're right, I'm not going.
Or is he window to bring in these voters?
Right. Is it just appealing to voters to get elected?
Here's what we're doing. We're looking at this on a bilateral basis. One of the things that I know about President Trump is that on economic matters, he is willing to listen to multiple voices.
Oh, great. So corporate rates might go up to 28%.
No, he will ask the next question, which is why. Why do you think they should go up?
What did you say yesterday? Because it's fair. It's 28%.
Let me be clear.
Looks better.
Let me be clear.
Perception of.
But it's the look. Even if it doesn't bring in a lot of money, the argument has always been that it doesn't seem fair if you're going to raise taxes in other places to try and balance the deficit, to not raise it there too. Or is this just a situation where we're not going to care about raising taxes? You lower everybody's taxes and don't worry about what happens to the deficit. You figure you make it up on growth.
Okay. Couple of things that you know from the last Trump administration. Smart deregulation. Not a free-for-all deregulation, but smart. And there are lots of places where we are overregulated. You're going to have Scott Gottlieb on.
Yep.
What Scott Gottlieb did at the FDA was he said, we've been doing it the same way for 25 years. Does this make any sense at all? And all of a sudden, drug approval and like much faster. Deregulation will happen.
Right.
Well,
okay.
Why pick him if you're not going to listen to him, why pick him? Why didn't he pick Burgum or someone that's on board with all the normal?
I didn't say he wasn't going to listen to him. Look.
Well, if he listens to him, we're going to be in this.
Right. I think the question is, if you are David Zaslav, as an example, we were talking earlier this morning about the news that Warner Brothers Discovery may want to start to sell some of its assets or other things. A lot of them big media companies would love to merge with each other, as you know. A lot of them think they can't do that today under a Biden administration with Alina Khan and this Department of Justice, but they thought, perhaps up before JD Vance got on board, that perhaps in a Trump administration there might be the ability to do those type of transactions. Does the JD Vance of it all change that?
I don't think it fundamentally changes that.
Can I?
I really don't, because what have we seen from Alina Khan administration? All big is bad. You're going to have a much more nuanced view of that.
So some big is bad.
Some big is bad, depending on whether you have a global market or a domestic market.
Okay.
If we have a global market, a U.S. firm getting bigger is generally not a big thing, not a bad thing.
Although this is something that Judd Gregg emailed us this morning. Just the irony is that the multinationals that mean anything are the Metas, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, that these are the ones who have billions of users across the world. They give America a disproportionate advantage to the world of commerce and the new world of AI. But when you listen to this sort of rhetoric, it locks in that these are bad things. It's 1950s language you put on top of that. Big tech, is that going to be a focus in a potential next Trump administration for deregulation or for existing regulation that's cracked down pretty hard on them? A lot of those cases started in the last Trump administration.
Yeah. What part of big tech is really what you need to think about? So we're subsidizing the heck out of chips, right? So we're already saying we're going all in on continued technological advancement. On the side of big tech that makes us all uncomfortable, which is how much are they controlling what we and our children are seeing, I think you are going to see scrutiny from the Trump administration. But we're all in on tech leadership. I agree with Judd. The benefit to all Americans because of our tech advantage, think about it this way. Every person that comes out of poverty around the globe, or every person that moves up from, say, the poverty level up into the middle class, the U.S., because of its tech leadership and the need to get connected, gets a giant dividend. We should never give up leadership in that area.
Right. Let me ask you about the corporate tax rate. One of the things that former President Trump said in that article in Business Week this week was that he planned to get the rate down to 15%, which is lower than I think anybody had anticipated, expected. I would argue even the 21% or 20% rate was unexpected, given that it seemed like the business community was prepared to accept a 25% rate at that time. If you remember, Gary Cohn and others came on and even talked about this quite openly. If you bring it down to 15% and you have any ambition to bring down the debt and deficit in this country, you're going to have to make up the money somewhere. You can hope that that's going to create more revenue at some degree, but I think the math gets very complicated very quickly. So where does that get made up? Does it get made up on the wealthy? Does it get made up on the middle class? What happens?
Okay, two things. One is on the corporate tax rate, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, lowering the corporate rate, we look at it in absolute terms. The most important thing to do is look at it in relative terms to the rest of the world. By lowering those taxes, the U.S. became more competitive for investment. We started to onshore a lot more, creating jobs. That's why we had real wage growth. Those are all incredible policy achievements. So we have to be very careful about making us less competitive from a tax perspective. On where do we make it up? I think the reality train around here is starting to enter station on a lot of things. And one of them is, how much more revenue can we generate under any tax scheme? You know what? I think you ask liberal economists, conservative economists, there's a cap on that. That cap is lower than our spending. We're going to have to come to grips with spending, no matter what tax policy we have.
You have not heard the word cutting spending during the Republican National Convention at all.
That's the math.
That's the math. By the way, Democrats aren't talking about doing that either.
No,
but you would think that the Republicans might.
But the crux of the matter is
with tax policies. I'm like, what's the maximum revenue you're going to get?
Jay, the crux is whether
it's not a big number.
Jay, the crux is whether tax reductions are still part of the platform of the Republican Party, because you're hearing that the ascension of JD Vance legitimizes this whole movement called American competition, whatever you want to call it. Lighthizer on the board of this. They don't want to cut corporate taxes. They want to raise corporate taxes. The populist movement that he represents, JD Vance, you can't assume that the next move would be cutting taxes. If they had their way, is Trump going to say no?
I think this is why.
Is he a classic Reaganomics guy, Trump, or not? Is he a populist that's going to do all these, I mean, just you started with saying that Wall Street's bad. I mean, you didn't say it, but that's what we heard last night.
And Wall Street, when Wall Street and the government get together.
Okay, that's corporatism. That's
right?
not. Is capitalism going to be the foundation? They're not going to be apologizing for capitalism.
Capitalism will absolutely be the foundation. And they won't
be apologizing.
Why are we better off than Europe? So much better off than Europe over the last 25 years, because we have nimble labor.
But the organization I'm talking about is more like progressivism, and they have the ear of a lot of Republicans right there. I heard it wasn't your grandfather's Republican Party or father's Republican Party anymore. It's a populist party that tends towards.
Here's my hope, Joe. I mean, I understand what you're saying. My hope is that populism and U.S. competitiveness come together.
They're oxymorons, aren't they?
No, they're not always oxymorons. When look, Chinese EVs. Should we have tariffs on Chinese EVs right now?
I don't know.
100%.
What if we do it better here?
Well, what if we do it better, but they're subsidizing it by 30%? It's hard to do it 30% better.
Do you think we're cutting corporate taxes, or what would you prefer?
I would probably like to see them stay. I think we're pretty competitive already.
You need a globally competitive.
That's why I'm not advocating that you get all the way.
You just want to pay for it, though.
We need to figure out ways to pay for it, and I think it is sort of Alice in Wonderland to think that you can lower rates on everybody and somehow it's going to make up for things. I think we all agree it doesn't. You also have to, by the way, deal with the spending side, which nobody wants to talk about. But you need to do both. It's all of the above. It can never be
going back to Joe's question,
one or the other.
What is President Trump going to ask? What gets us back to real growth, real wage growth, and low inflation? Those are the objectives.
I agree that those are the objectives. Having said that, I do think it's fair to say if you look over the years at which party, for better or worse, has been more responsible around the debt and deficits the last 30 years, you would ultimately actually argue, I know COVID came into it, that the Democrats did a better job than the Republicans did. You may disagree about that, but I think that's like
no. We just went from 100% to 120% debt to GDP under the Biden administration.
We didn't need when JD Vance is in a debate, who's it going to be with?
When he's in,
who's going to be the vice president that he nominee that he debates?
That's a good question.
Not Kamala Harris.
Who?
Wes Moore.
Interesting. Jay Clayton with a bold call this morning.
And
Thank
an
you,
answer.
sir, for coming in.
You didn't have to answer.
You didn't have to answer.
Every once in a while, I gotta do it.
Stepping out.
Be like our other guests.
Next on Squawk Pod.
I have been Googling my medical symptoms for years and scaring the heck out of myself, convincing myself I have everything wrong with me under the sun. Are you telling me that ChatGPT is going to be better at that?
How ChatGPT and Grok and Claude and Gemini and Llama outperform most doctors on a medical exam, and how to get around their guardrails to get the information you want. Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Gottlieb joins us.
Tell the model that this is a hypothetical patient on a medical exam, and then that seems to get around their default setting.
The AI doctor is ready to see you right after this. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC with Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Here's Becky.
All right, welcome back, everybody. ChatGPT is the top-performing doctor in a new study conducted on 5 AI language models. It scored 98% on the same 50 questions that doctors have to answer to get a medical license, beating competitors Claude, Gemini, Grok, and hugging chat/llama. Joining us more right now with more on this is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's former FDA Commissioner, also a CNBC contributor. And Dr. Gottlieb, I have to say I learned a lot reading through your article that's now posted on this. I think the thing I learned that shocked me the most is that doctors only have to get a 60% to basically get a passing grade on this.
Yeah, and the average score is a 75%, and all of these large language models pass the medical licensing exam. So what we did was we fed 50 questions from the USMLE Step 3 medical licensing exam. So this is the third in a three-part series of exams that doctors take. Typically, you'll take this Step 3 while you're in your first year of residency, and it's the final step before getting your medical license. So we fed 50 questions from this exam to the top 5 large language models. We were expecting more separation, and quite frankly, I wasn't expecting the models to do as well as they did. The reason why we wanted to do this was a lot of consumers and physicians are using these large language models to answer medical questions, and there really wasn't good evidence out there on which ones were better. There were some studies looking at individual models, mostly ChatGPT, but no one had compared across the different models. And the results were really striking to me, the fact that ChatGPT got a near perfect score. And the other thing that ChatGPT was able to do was contextualize its responses. So it didn't just give you the answer, but it explained why it chose a particular answer and then why it didn't choose other answers. So it was very descriptive and gave you a lot of good information.
I have been Googling my medical symptoms for years and scaring the heck out of myself, convincing myself I have everything wrong with me under the sun. Are you telling me that ChatGPT is going to be better at that? Or is it going to be more of the same because I am clearly just somebody who worries way too much about things?
Yeah, look, I think the large language models are certainly better than using open source, search techniques like Google. They provide richer information, more descriptive information, and a lot of them will also provide references as well, or references certainly if you ask for them. And in some of the language models, we didn't look at perplexity specifically, but that will certainly provide links to sources of information. But ChatGPT did the same thing. Llama did that. Grok was doing that. So they were providing links back to the source information, so you're able to go back and look at a richer data set.
How is that any different, though? Because I think I'm pretty good at Googling this stuff, where I will look back to find, hard journals that come from scientific places that I really trust. How are they better at this than what Google already does? If I'm a practice user of Google who knows which references I really want to keep.
Yeah, look, I think if you just use general search, you have to put the information together for yourself. One of the things you can do with these large language models, and I've done it, is you can put in a series of symptoms and laboratory results and ask it to sort of risk adjust what the probable etiologies are. And the models will do that, and they do a reasonably good job at that. I've put in lab results, extensive lab results that were quite perplexing, and the models were able to give a pretty good differential diagnosis. And so that's how I think you can use the models in a more effective way than just using, open searching.
That's a lot different than a basic consumer kind of using these things and trying to figure it out. You're a doctor, you were putting in lab results and real things, not just symptoms. Oh, I have a headache, I must have a tumor. And you were putting in lab results and saying, why would you get these things? Is this a tool that doctors are going to be able to use to come up with more complex settings more complex diagnoses than they would be maybe without it?
Yeah, and a broader differential diagnosis. The key to medicine is coming up with a list of what the probable causes are given a certain set of symptoms. And these models can do a very good job at that. And, I've put in a lot of hypothetical scenarios to test these models. They're pretty good. One of the things, though, you have to be mindful of is that the models are probably instructed not to give medical advice. And so if it smells too much like you're asking for personal medical advice and putting in your personal symptoms, sometimes they'll balk and tell you to go see a doctor. So one way to sort of engineer around that is to tell the model that this is a hypothetical patient on a medical exam, and then that seems to get around their default settings. And so it's something you need to be mindful of when you use these things.
But are you saying that this is a better tool for consumers, or you think that this is really going to be more useful for medical professionals who already have a broad understanding, which maybe gets them to a rare diagnosis that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise?
Yeah, I think both. I think physicians are and can use this to generate a differential diagnosis. I wouldn't use it to generate a treatment plan that I'm going to follow. But I think in terms of coming up with what possible etiologies are, these could be very good. I think for consumers, they're a better tool, frankly, than searching, because if you're not if you don't have a base of medical knowledge and you're not adept at searching for these things, sometimes you can end up down a rabbit hole looking for the wrong information, reading the wrong information. And I think these models are much less likely if you if you put in a good compilation of what what symptoms you're looking to search, or what diseases you're looking to generate information on. I think these models can provide a much more focused answer.
Scott, we're about out of time. Just very quickly, there's been this idea that the more information you have, the better it is. Would you agree that putting stuff like Reddit and tweets from X and all different kinds of things into something is better? Or do you think sticking to medical journals and maybe other scientific-based things is a better way of going about it? What would you rather see as a physician?
For medical applications, I think you're going to have to stick to authoritative information. And certainly for regulatory purposes, these things, when they become medical devices and they seek clearances for use cases like actual applications in patient care, FDA is going to regulate them based on the information that they're trained on.
That makes sense. Dr. Gottlieb, thank you. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Check this out. Ken Griffin, the founder of hedge fund Citadel, he's now paid more than $44 million for a 150-year-old Stegosaurus fossil. It's known as Apex. The dinosaur stands 11 feet tall, 27 feet long. It surpassed its pre-sale low estimate by more than 11-fold. That's according to Sotheby's. The bidder was officially anonymous, at least originally, but a person familiar with Griffin's plans confirming to the Financial Times that Griffin was indeed the buyer and that he intended to put it on display at a U.S. museum. Back in 2018, Griffin gave $16.5 million to a Chicago museum to fund the display of a dinosaur known as
Titanosaur?
Titanosaurus.
But it was 150 million
years old.
Yeah,
150 years
That would be weird. That would be a Jurassic Park type thing. That would be
yes,
cloning couple.
That's coming soon to a theater near you.
There is one. I think they could supposedly do a woolly mammoth. I think we're
That's
ready.
What we've been talking about. Woolly mammoth for a very long time.
Might be able to do that. Maybe it tastes good.
I was going to go to the Beyond Meat.
I know you would, because we can't do the Beyond Meat. What about mammoth burgers?
No, you don't bring it back just to eat it.
How are you going to control them?
I think you could.
How are you going to control them?
Huh?
You're going to have like a farm with these guys?
On an island. Nothing could ever happen there.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
And that is Squawk Pod for today, this Thursday. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.